You know what Mercosur is? In this video, I cover 4 key points that I consider central so you can really understand this topic, even if you have never studied it before. They are what Mercosur is, the stages of integration of economic blocs, the historical context of the creation of Mercosur, as well as some contemporary aspects. So, let's get started with the video. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Paolo, your geography teacher. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here with me on Geo Illustrata. Our topic today is Mercosur. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. To start things off, what exactly is Mercosur? Basically, it's South America's economic bloc, whose goal is to promote regional integration among South American countries. In this case, the founding members are Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. But we'll talk a bit more about the members later, all right? Through this regional integration, the main goal of Mercosur was to create a common market among the member countries, which would result in the free movement of goods, workers, and capital, as well as a common external tariff, or CET, for non-member countries. But I'll talk a bit more about the CET in a moment, all right? Before that, you need to understand that everything I've mentioned so far were the objectives of Mercosur. However, not all of them were achieved. And here's something very important. When we talk about regional integration between countries, about economic blocs, there are stages of integration. So let's talk a bit about these stages now so you can understand which one Mercosur is in. And here I'll give you a quick summary, all right? So we don't take too long. The first and most basic stage is the free trade area, which essentially aims to eliminate barriers like import and export taxes. As an example of this, we can mention NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. The next stage of integration would be the customs union, which, in addition to all the aspects of the previous stage, also establishes a common external tariff, the CET, which I mentioned a little while ago. But what exactly is this CET? Basically, it's the standardization of tariffs by countries within the same bloc in trade operations involving countries outside the bloc. Pretty straightforward, right? The next stage would be the common market. Among other aspects, within this stage of integration, there is also the free movement of people between member countries for work or even to establish residence in other countries. Other countries within the same bloc, of course. And the last and most advanced stage of the integration process would be the economic and monetary union, which, in addition to all the previous characteristics, would also involve the adoption of a common currency among the countries in the bloc. As an example, we can mention the European Union, which actually adopted a common currency, in this case, the euro. But at which of these stages is Mercosur currently, Professor? In this case, at the second stage, that is, the customs union. Pretty straightforward, right? Let's go now then and talk about the historical context of the creation of Mercosur, which is also an extremely important topic. And here again, I'm going to give a summary of some of the main aspects, all right? Well, the first initiative towards regional integration in South America happened in 1960 with the Treaty of Montevideo, which was signed by all the South American republics and Mexico, thus creating the Latin American Free Trade Association, or LAFTA. However, this treaty didn't work out as intended, which led to the signing of a new Treaty of Montevideo, this one in the 1980s, replacing LAFTA with ALADI, or the Latin American Integration Association, which aimed to promote this regional development among South American countries, mainly through the reduction of tariffs between the members. However, such an agreement did not prove to be so advantageous for the largest countries in the group, in this case, Brazil and Argentina, which began to prioritize bilateral agreements between themselves, as was the case with the bilateral agreement between Brazil and Argentina, signed in 1986, which provided for a progressive integration process between these two countries. However, later on, other countries also showed interest in this agreement, such as Chile and Uruguay. But Chile eventually withdrew, making room for Paraguay. So finally, in 1991, after intense negotiations between these countries, the Treaty of Asunción was signed, thus creating the Southern Common Market, or Mercosur, an economic bloc formed by Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. With this summary done, let's move on to the final part of the video and talk about how the block is currently structured. But before that, just a quick note. If you want access to the mind map for this video, as well as for all the other videos on the channel, check out our Kit Mapas Mentais Geo Illustrata. I'm sure it will really help you with your studies. And by getting it, you'll also be supporting this channel a lot. The link is in the video description, okay? Currently, Mercosur has 5 member countries: Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And don't forget that, okay? This often appears in exams and college entrance tests. But the bloc also includes associate countries, in this case Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, and Suriname. Guyana here is not French Guiana, okay? It's just Guyana. And it's also essential for you to know that Bolivia is in the process of joining to become a member country. What are the differences between member and associated countries? Basically, the associated countries do not adopt the CET, or Common External Tariff, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And here, moving towards the end, I want to point out a few important things you need to know. In 2012, Paraguay was suspended. This was due to the removal of the country's president at the time, Fernando Hugo, which was understood by the bloc's countries as a violation of its democratic principle. That's why they imposed this punishment on Paraguay. And in the same year, 2012, Venezuela joined the group. And Paraguay also ended up returning after its presidential elections. And even though it was reluctant, it ended up accepting Venezuela's entry. So with that, it also officially became part of the bloc. However, in 2017, Venezuela was suspended from the group. And since then, Venezuela has been suspended from Mercosur. This, among other factors, is due to the fact that the other member countries believe there was a democratic breakdown in the country, which violates the bloc's rules. I'm leaving 2 additional videos on the screen, one of them about BRICS. I'm sure you'll like them too. That's it. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Don't forget to check out our mind maps. See you next time. Bye.